Yesterday was so exciting. Lots of draws. And this game also doesn't look super promising. So I've taken in some of your feedback. And today we're gonna try something a little bit different. I'm gonna give you some positions arising from either sidelines or what happened in the games. And I'm gonna give you the opportunity to take this as a chance to learn. So let's go. Alright, first game. Wei with the white pieces, Prague with the black pieces. And the game started with the French defense. Very fun. So the line was knight c3, knight f6. We push the knight back, we take control of the center, we build a little pyramid. But then black tries to undermine it with various pawn breaks. So some normal French moves were played and eventually we ended up in this position. And the way we're gonna do this recap, I'm gonna ask you some questions. And if you want, you can pause the video, figure them out, and every time you get one correct, you get a point, and then comment down below how many points you got in total. So for the first question, in this position, white is not yet committed to castling on either side. And there's a slightly interesting move here. What I need you to do is I want you to evaluate the move on take c5. This is a pretty tricky exercise, so take some time for it, and I'll give the answer right now. So, after the move pawn to c5, what's the whole point? Well, we're gonna obviously take back with the knight. This hits the light square bishop, and if we're forced into something like, let's say, long castles, giving up the piece, this is obviously not that good. So then what is the move? Here we play the move bishop takes c5. Now you might be asking yourself, wait, Red Panda, I thought we didn't want to lose the bishop pair. That's a really common, but still really nice tactic. Bishop to h7. If you saw up until this point, you get the point. What is the idea? Well, after the move king takes, you of course play knight to g5. Okay, king g8 here is the only normal move. If you try something like king to g6, then I'm not fully sure. Probably queen d3. This is nearly checkmate, right? Like if you go to h6, there's queen h7. So after queen d3, probably have to play f5. Probably just queen g3 here. The king can't escape. King tries to hide over here. You just get checkmated like this. And we have some various threats over here. So this just seems winning. So okay, king g8 is the only logical move. Now normally if the queen was on d1, we could just play queen h5. We can't do that here. But what's the other move? Well, queen to d3. We also threatening to go to the h7 square. That would be mate. And if we try to defend with something like f5, well now queen h3 just wins. If we play something like, I don't know, rook to e8, then queen h7, king f8 is the only move. And then after queen h8, king e7, this is mate. Now I checked briefly with the engine. Apparently after the move rook to f7, the game goes on for a while. Here the best move is long castles. But white here gets a strong attack. Black's pieces are still out of play. And the skin is gonna be weak for a long time. So you're just clearly better. Now during the game we saw the move short castles. And then black played the move pawn f6. Now for the second question, I want you to evaluate which move is better, pawn takes c5 or pawn takes f6. So take your time and I'll give the answer right now. What's going on in this position? What's being threatened? Well, let's just make a nothing move. Here the threat is pawn takes e5. We can't take with the d pawn because of the fork over here. If we take with this pawn instead, we can now capture on d4. Now taking with the bishop, we'll take here and the pawn will be hen-in. If we take with the knight instead, well then still this pawn is simply hen-in. We lost material. Black is a lot better here. So that's the threat. And between these, the better one was actually pawn takes f6. Why is that? Well, if we take over here, now the computer will tell you that the difference isn't that big. From a human perspective, it's probably a bit more substantial than that. Here we have to move pawn takes e5. Now we take back and we can grab this pawn. The bishop is hit, so we're gonna have to retreat it. And here probably if anyone is better, it's black. The central structure is actually quite nice. And white has a weakness on e5 to attend to. So instead after the move pawn takes f6, now we can't take back with the pawn. So really only knight takes back makes sense. And from here the game went on. Eventually we got into this position. White played the move knight to e5. And another question to you, can black win a pawn over here? So calculate it through and let me know. I'm gonna tell you now. The answer is no. We can grab it, of course. It's not losing or anything, but it doesn't win us a pawn. Why not? Well, we can take, black will take back. And as you might be feeling with this pawn over here blockaded, this is probably a bit of a weakness. The knight can drop back to e2. We're targeting it now. And after moving like knight to e4, we simply trade. Now, if you saw that in this position the pawn is hen-in, you get half a point. However, that being said, the pawn is hen-in, but in this variation specifically, yes, this structure is a bit damaged, but with the bishop pair, we maybe allow black a slight bit too much. For the full point here, you had to see the move knight to c6. This forks these two pieces. We take, and now we can take the pawn. And with black's damaged structure, the only one who can be better here is probably white. The game went on, but then after knight e4, both players decided to go for a large exchange of pieces. And here, well, we got a lot of trades in. This endgame went on for a little bit, but as you can see with the opposite color bishops, this game ended in a draw. Next game, Sindarov with the white pieces, Bluebaum with the black pieces. And the game went into a Petrov, notoriously drawish line. And we got the into this position over here, which has been reached plenty of times. And here, black made the decision queen takes e2, which might seem, you know, a little bit strange. Like, generally, we would love white to take us. So we developed this bishop. And looking at the Lichess database, you know, a lot of people here simply play the move knight b to d7. The question is after the move knight d7, what can white do over here to put pressure on black? Think about it. I'll give you the answer right now. So here, after we've played the move pawn f3, a move we can play is pawn to g4. And this may be a little bit awkward. First of all, we need to make a decision with our bishop over here. Now, you might be tempted by the move bishop to g6. Okay, fair enough. However, with the knight exercising pressure on the bishop, this bishop is actually horribly misplaced over here. We can simply play the move pawn h4. If we ever play a move like h6, we can take. This pawn structure is horrible. Our pieces kind of look awkward. We have the bishop pair. White has a very healthy advantage. If instead we go with the pawn to h5, another downside of the move knight d7 is actually this knight doesn't have any squares. So here we simply play g4. The knight has to go to the d5 square, and here we can always take, crippling black's pawn structure. Maybe a computer holds this, but this is just not pleasant. But okay, I hear you ask, what if we go to e6? This is the better move. Still, we can go for h4. Knight g5 is still maybe a bit of a problem. And if we try something like h6 to keep control over this square, also there's a pin, then white simply has a lot of ways to get a pleasant position. We could, for example, take on e6, but a more precise maneuver here is to move knight to d2. Let's say we castle, the knight can go to c4. You might be thinking, haha, we can simply take because you can't take back. Well, I take here first and then I take. White has the bishop pair. Black is maybe a bit cramped for space, so we should be better. So can you play knight b d7 here? Yes, there is this move with bishop e6, but we kind of give white more than we should. This is also why after the capture back here, black played the move pawn to h5. Ah, see, it all makes sense. And we ended up in this position. Now, question, this looks maybe interesting. Evaluate the move pawn to d5. Is this a good move? You got some time to pause the video, but I'll give you the answer right now. After the pawn to d5 move, is this alright? Well, first of all, let's go over this. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, I see that if I take, my structure is perhaps a bit weak. What happens here if I play the move pawn to c5? This pawn really cramps black for space, particularly the dark square bishop will not be able to find a home. If we do engage with this capture, well, you might notice there are two attackers and two defenders. If you want the full point, and here you had to find the move rook to d1. Now, the game went on for quite some time, and eventually a position like this was reached. You might notice the presence of a tactic in the position. My question to you, does the move bishop takes f5 win a pawn for white? Takes some time, it's a simple yes or no to get the point. I'm gonna give you the answer right now. The answer is no. However, bishop f5 was still played. What's the line over here? Well, we take back. There is now a pin in existence. The whole point is here the move pawn to g6. And this is a problem for black. The rook is hen-in. We of course cannot slide back because here we have a rook sacrifice. And it's really easy to count that after g7, because the rook can't go to g5, this pawn will promote. So here you have to play the move rook g7 and rook takes h5. And here you might notice that after rook takes pawn, we're up a point of material. Hey, very nice. But this doesn't tell the full story, because here black has to move king to e6. And this is one thing about calculation. When you're calculating, very likely what will happen in your head, you'll be in this position and you'll calculate all these lines. And at the end you go, oh, okay, and then takes. Hey, I'm up a pawn. This is pretty normal because they're all forcing moves. However, here black has to move into e6. Simply defending. We're not picking this pawn up yet. Rook to h6, simply king f6. The bishop can't defend. The king can't defend, so we won the pawn on the next move. Bishop e1, rook takes, and here both players agreed to a draw. So yeah, the other games ended in a draw. Not the most eventful day, but that's why, you know, I felt comfortable experimenting with this new format. The stand-ins are this: Fabi, Sindarov, and Prague sharing for first place, Wei and Matthias close behind, and then Hikaru, Anish, and Nasipenko sharing for last place at the moment. These will be the pairings for tomorrow. Let me know if you prefer this new format. If I get a lot of positive feedback, I could do something similar for the next time. I could also go back to the way I did it in the first episode, but because all the games ended in a draw, I felt like this was probably a pretty good way to go about it. So if you think you like this video, please give it a watch. I worked hard on it, and see you guys later. Bye bye.